But each one of you taking the time to come out here in an evening and listen to a presentation on insurance tells me that you understand that you represent something larger than yourself. Each one of you will go back to your local church, and everything that you and I do at our local church is a representation of Seventh-day Adventist Church around the world. It's really fun. I landed here yesterday. I drove down the road. The elder was pointing out Adventist Church. It's really neat to see that emblem of the church all over the world. I'm part of something bigger. What do we have in Seventh-day Adventist Church in our communities? What do we bring? I would argue what the church has is our reputation. We don't make widgets. We don't sell, parachutes. But we have our reputation. Each one of us make up the reputation of the Adventist Church. Things I do, things I say are the reputation of the church. It's always interesting when I travel. I run into Adventists all over the world, and it reminds me of, I better be on my best behavior no matter where I'm at. I stay at a hotel that's just near the airport in London. There's not a lot of places to eat around there. There's a McDonald's, quality food maybe. There's a little Indian restaurant that closes early, and then there's another place that's a bar that has a restaurant. You get my point. I usually end up at McDonald's eating side salad, trying to look as healthy as I can, trying to keep it in there. We'll come back to that, but care, custody, and control. Those three words didn't have meaning to me in a phrase like that till I got into this ministry. When it comes to the youth, people that are not of age, they come to Pathfinders, they come to Sabbath school, they come to potluck, they get dropped off at the church by their parents. Heard the drive-by parents before? Come back 2 hours later, they know their kid's been cared for and gone to Sabbath school, right? But whether we do it on purpose or whether it's not on purpose, when a kid is in the care, custody, and control of us, we are their parents. I don't have kids. My wife teaches first grade. She decided that was enough every year. I was kind of like, okay, I'm happy with that. But I watch parents and the emotions they have and the love they have for their kids. And I would argue that as a church, as any organization, parents probably expect us to conduct ourselves at a higher level than they would as parents. It's just the way it is. Okay, that's the way it is. We've got to figure that out. But the easiest claim, the easiest lawsuit is, my child would not have gotten hurt if you had supervised. My child would have not gotten inappropriately touched if you had just supervised. That's almost an undefendable lawsuit because the child's not an adult. He or she can't represent themselves in any situation legally. We are the parent. And that becomes a big challenge for us as a church. I saw two people here with Pathfinder shirts on. I don't share this story very often. I think I had a career in Pathfinders for about 6 months. I don't think it was my fault. But I share the story as a lesson. I have 3 younger brothers. They're about, two of them are, one of them's 5 years younger than me. He doesn't count. We call him, he's a little too small for us. But the other 2 are about, 5'8", big. They're big dudes. I tell people, I used to fight with them all the time until they got bigger than me. Then we started using words. But I had my 2 younger brothers, and I had a friend. My friend is taller than me and a little bit bigger than me. So we joined Pathfinders, and I don't remember the exact age, probably 9, 10 years old. And I remember vividly, we were young men. No, we were boys. We were full of energy. We had grown up in the country. My poor mom, I look at her nowadays, I'm like, how did you raise 4 boys? She still survives. But we were kids. We were full of energy. And we showed up to Pathfinders, and the person they assigned as our leader was a young man that I'm guessing was 19 or 20 years old. And I'm sure we tested him every chance we could. I'm sure we were obnoxious. I'm sure, I don't like seeing him recording this because it might get out, I'm sure we were wrong. But they had assigned him care, custody, and control of us. So no matter what we did, it was his job to be the adult. Or to find additional resources, or to go talk to my mom and say, you know what, you're going to have to stagger your young men to come into Pathfinders every 5 years. I don't know what the answer would have been. But his answer was, guys, I've had enough of your tomfoolery. We're all going out to the parking lot and we're going to have a fight. And I'm going to teach each one of you a lesson. Now remember, we're the 9 and 10 years old and he's the 19 or 20 year old. He's the adult. We went to the parking lot. He lost. We got kicked out of Pathfinders. We lost. But I share that as when you're in Pathfinders, when you're in youth Sabbath school, when you take people wherever it is, who's the adult in the room? Yeah, my brothers and I, my friend, we were wrong. But if that happened today, and my parents weren't who they are, they could sue the Adventist Church. Because yeah, I mean, he lost, but we got some bumps and bruises too. It wasn't as if we walked out of there unscathed. And my mom was really upset and she was very embarrassed. But she could have sued the Adventist Church because they put someone in charge of us who didn't belong there. We have a duty to protect. We'll get more into protecting children, but we have a duty to protect children. We have a duty to make sure that the environment of our church is kept to a level that someone would expect it to be cared for. Money's tight everywhere in the Adventist Church. But if I walked into this church, I have an expectation that the carpet will be cared for. There's an expectation when I sit down that the back of the pew isn't going to fall over. There's cords. I don't think these are necessarily out of place. This isn't a place that we're going to walk through. Someone is at least cared for and said, you know what? We're going to at least put these in a place where people aren't walking. Yeah, there's a side of me that says we shouldn't have extension cords. Not picking on this church, but that's the common thing is when you walk into a location, when you walk into a grocery store, if there was water on the floor, you would expect there to be a sign. You would expect there to be someone showing up pretty quickly with a mop and a bucket to clean it up. We have to have those same standards in our churches. You have a leadership role. Leadership is an interesting thing to me. I'm not a natural leader in my own mind. Yes, I was this tall when I was in 8th grade. I was really excited. I was a big Michael Jordan fan, and he's 6'6". I was going to be 6'6". No problem at the age of 8 or 9 years old. I was right here. I'm like, dude, I'm going to grow for a few more years. I just hit the peak and stopped growing, unfortunately. I was the oldest of 4 boys. I guess people naturally followed me to get in trouble at that point in our lives. But there's a lot of attributes that leaders need to portray. But I think one of the hardest things in the Adventist Church, in any not-for-profit organization, is the word no. Can you imagine telling your pastor that his kid can't go on the Pathfinder outing because of X, Y, and Z? Can you imagine if the person's a really large donor to our church and their kid is misbehaving constantly and is providing disruption to the care, custody, and control of the other 20 kids we're trying to provide a learning experience for? And you get to walk up to that person and say, Elder, we can't get your kid to behave at the standards we expect for all of our kids. He's no longer invited to. That's tough. That's tough. That's tough. Getting some laughs here in front. We know somebody. I'm not going to dig deeper into that one. Can you imagine taking what happens on a Friday afternoon? You find out with the Pathfinder group, or that on Sunday there's going to be a work bee at the church, but no one's put in the planning to make sure the work bee is going to be well put together and safe. Can you be the leader that stands up and says, you know what? We're not ready to do this right now. That's hard. I think the other side of that is, are you ready and are you prepared to plan for those things? It's a lot of people I notice around my life that are full of ideas. A lot of people get really tired when they have to work. I'm not talking to that group. You're clearly here. You're listening to a guy talk about insurance, so you're doers. The Ministry of Risk Management. Risk identification. The three things we're going to talk about here are a constant in the life of a risk manager. You identify risk. I walked in with the treasurer and he goes, do you notice anything out of place in the church? It's a fair question. I chuckled inside and go, boy, that's the reputation we have. I will admit, I look everywhere I go. But when you drive down the road, are you looking at the end of your hood of your car and worried about where that is? Or are you one of the people that look out 20, 30, 40, 50 feet? Are you looking for the side street that, yes, you don't have the stop sign, but the car coming across does, and are you concerned when you see that car still going 40 miles an hour 20 feet from the stop sign? Are you looking for the risks? When you walk into a building, I worked with a guy, he just started working with us, he's a military guy. I went somewhere with him and we would walk into somewhere and he would never sit with he would do his best to not sit with his back to the door. And he'd always just kind of walk around the building and, what are you doing? He's all looking for the bathroom. I'm like, no, it's my military training. I sit so I can see who's going to come in. I go into a building and I assess what are the exits, what are the egresses I have if something goes wrong. And I was like, wow, that's interesting, because in his career, doing that was life and death. That was the difference. But I think identifying risk here is life and death for the Adventist Church. It's life and death for the kids that we that we're witnessing to. We have a claim in our history. They call it the 5-cent nut. You know what a nut and a bolt is? 5 cents. We had a school. Imagine with me, it has the hot plate carts. It's the kind where you slide your tray along and you serve, or someone's serving the food there. Everybody knew for years that one of those hot plates wasn't secured, those carts wasn't secured to the floor. Everybody knew it, but no one would go and buy the 5-cent nut and just secure it down. I mean, there's literally a bolt sticking up in the floor with the cart sitting on top of it. All you have to do is screw the nut on. Everybody knew it, everybody ignored it. Second or third grade little girl is sliding her thing down. They're kids. She decides she's going to do a pull-up on the side of that cart. Falls over. She's severely burned. We can pay money to her, we can pay money to her family. But when I sit back and I think about it, that little girl will have scars on her body for the rest of her life. Does she have the same confidence that she had the second before that happened? What happens when she goes to the pool in the summer? Gets to wear a bathing suit and she's got burns on her legs. What's that little girl's life like? What's the perception her uncle who isn't an Adventist of the Adventist church? Did they care for his little niece? Take the time to identify the risk. But the next thing is risk control, the prevention, the 5-cent nut. There's a lot of things we as a church do that is just a 5-cent nut. I walk through here to use the restroom. There's a little bump in the floor. I'm not asking this church to get a jackhammer and remove the bump in the floor. It's a natural bump between what I'm guessing is an addition to the church. It's through a door jamb. But someone painted it really nice and red. It's a cheap fix to something that's naturally there. But the prevention and the maintenance. Unfortunately, the Adventist church and the buildings we meet in are only getting older. When you're at your local church board, are you setting aside a budget to maintain the building? It's hard. It's hard to do because in our minds, that's money being set aside away from ministry, away from the until it's late on a Sunday, the church service, the programs that are going on. The Pathfinders need a new tent. The women's ministries needs this. All really good things. When I talked about Gen Con Insurance Company of Vermont, I talked about how it only gets money from the Adventist church to pay claims and in case we buy reinsurance, which is another cost of that company. But that company brings in about $100 million a year in premium from around the world church. The unfortunate thing is we pay out about $100 million a year in claims and reinsurance costs. That's our money. It's not as if somebody donated it. I mean, they did donate it to the church, but it's not as if I'm out with a printing press making money for Gen Con. It's $100 million of money that's not being used for other ministries. It's the 5-cent nut. It's the, did someone make sure the shutters were ready for the hurricane? Did somebody make sure that the floor wasn't slippery? I was looking through the claims for this area in our church. A lot of slips, trips, and falls. Guess what? That's not abnormal for the Adventist church. That's not abnormal for any business. But when someone slips and falls and they're injured, but we pay $30,000 or $40,000 later, because the Adventist church, the Adventist school didn't have the money up front to make sure whatever caused that was fixed for. It's a return on investment. I'm a business guy. I would rather have the Adventist church. You'll never probably hear this from another church administrator. I would love for Adventist risk management to cease to exist because the church had no more losses. That'd be totally fine with me. Because we were invested so much in prevention and risk control that there weren't losses, there weren't lawsuits. Because at the time the lawsuit happens, we're paying 5, 6, 10, 15, 20 times more than if we had just prevented it. And then we get to risk financing. I have a pet peeve in my life. I have a few. But I'll get phone calls from people. We want to do X. Is it covered by insurance? You know, I don't know. I'm guessing here you are required to have auto insurance, right? So you have auto insurance. You're okay having insurance and not wearing your seatbelt and not driving the speed limit, because if you get injured, you have insurance, right? No? Don't work? That's what's up there. And then we take that to another level, is the insurance company that would be insuring what we're going to do as a church is our insurance company. We're not taking money away from some big fat investor or stockholder. We're taking money away from us. My appeal is the last thing we ask each other is it covered by insurance? Now, there's a place for insurance. Accidents happen. You're going to do everything perfect as the Pathfinder leader. You're going to do everything perfect as a treasurer, and a kid is going to be a kid. And an accident's going to happen, and that's where the church insurance company comes in and says, we're here for you. We'll do our best to prevent the church from going bankrupt. But these three things are key to ministry. We'll get into child safety. How many of you have heard of the 2 adult policy?
Yep.
You should never be alone with a child.
Nope.
Never be alone with a child. That's a tough one. My wife's a teacher. She's always like, yeah, you, Northrop, you live up there in the pearly gates of the General Conference, in the corner office. Let me tell you how school works. She's the Sabbath school superintendent at church, too, so I get it coming and going. I'm just like, you've got to stop volunteering. But let me tell you, on a Saturday morning, when little Sally's misbehaving and I need to take her out to the hallway and kind of read the riot act on care, custody, and control for you there, Mr. Northrop. I always know when I'm going to get a sermon when we start with Mr. Northrop. You know, like, oh, here we go. I'm going to get a real life experience. But it protects the child. There are very bad things that happen to children in our church when left alone with adults. I will work on the assumption that everybody in this room is a great person, loves children, and wouldn't do anything inappropriate. But you can protect yourself by having an adult witness what happens. You're going to have to discipline children. Take them to a corner in the room where there's other people that can see what's going on. Don't go behind the closed door and have the verbal discipline there. When I say discipline, I'm not talking about corporal punishment type stuff, but verbal communication. What does this do for ministry? Got to have some more adults volunteering to be part of our ministries. What does it do from a logistics and planning standpoint? What do you do when you're taking everybody in cars to go somewhere? Do you put one adult driving and 3 kids in the car? It's tough. The Adventist Church has had some of its worst claims in that scenario. This adult was doing inappropriate things with the kids in the car. And they were little kids, so no one knew how to talk or what to do. That's a very basic principle that can help our church a lot. Check in and out procedure. Talked about the drive-by parent. What happens if it's a different drive-by pickup parent than the one that drive by and dropped them off? Do you know?
Yep.
You know what the term legal guardian is?
Yep.
That may be different than the parent.
Yes.
And that may be different every other month. As a leader, as a youth leader in our church, you're going to have to stay close to the parental units and understand what's going on.
Yep.
I think there's always been divorce in our society. But I think it's more prevalent now than it was. Just because you've known brother and sister Smith for the last 15 years, if they're going through a divorce, Brother Smith may not have legal guardianship of those kids and may not be allowed to pick them up anymore. I talked about leadership. That's an uncomfortable zone. That's not fun to walk up to someone and say, I'll do a lot better than this, but understand you're going through divorce. Can you legally pick up your child? I mean, a little bit strange, a little bit uncomfortable. But as a Sabbath school, as a Pathfinder group, as a school, do we have forms that people are filling out so that we're treating everybody the same? I'm not singling out somebody just because I heard they're having a problem. I remember when we were kids, we'd get done with church. We were running all over the church, running out, in the atrium. We lived in a pretty rural place. There was a Christmas tree farm behind the church. We were running through the Christmas tree farm. We'd get in my friend's car with his parents, and we'd end up at their house. Never told my parents where we were going. They weren't that concerned because they'd get home, they'd pick up, and they'd call the Mottneys. Oh yeah, Tim's over here. Okay, no big deal. We'll come get him after sundown or whatever. We don't have that kind of luxury. Check in, check out. I don't think it really matters how big the church is, but do you have a way to check kids in and out of Sabbath school? We have care, custody, and control, right? When they're in our Sabbath school rooms, the parent has given us care, custody, and control. At the end of Sabbath school, we don't get to open the door and go, fly free. I know of churches now that there's a screen in the main church, and when you drop your kid off, they give you a number. They say, your child, you're number 13. And if your kid is having a problem in Sabbath school, 13 will flash in the corner of the screen up front. And you get to go and pick up your kid. I'm not a parent. I don't know what's so funny. You got to switch the numbers up so no one knows who everybody is every week. My poor mom, 13, would have just been going constantly, but it's a different thing than when I was a kid. We just ran out of Sabbath school whenever we wanted and tore off through the town. But start thinking about these. Think about how we can help protect children. The 6-month rule. Heard of this? A few yeses? We have people that join our churches. They may be new converts.
Yep.
We have people who transfer from one Adventist church into our Adventist church. Get to know that person.
Yes.
Get to watch them. Figure out, maybe there's someone who's quick to temper. And they're just not the right fit to be around kids. But on day one, you don't know that. Maybe you watch them leave the parking lot, and every Saturday they're the ones that are spinning the tires at 100 miles an hour to get out on the street. Maybe you don't want to put your children that you have care, custody, and control in. But our ask is, take at least 6 months before you vote somebody into a position of leadership.
Amen.
That's right.
Get to know that person.
That's right.
Get to see what makes them tick. It's true for parents. Can't prevent a parent from coming and sitting in Sabbath school and being the parent for their kid. I'm a big proponent of that. I think that we should be more parents in Sabbath school, more parents in Pathfinders. But before you assign them to watch other kids, or to be the associate Pathfinder leader, or to teach the class or the thing on, it's funny, I remember the one that was not time. For some reason, that was one of the things I passed in the first 6 months. First and only 6 months, there we go. But get to know people. We talked about leadership. It's going to be an interesting conversation if someone really wants to be in youth ministry, but they don't have the personality to do it. And you're going to say, no, we're not going to ask you to serve in youth ministries, but maybe you can help us out in the sound room. But you got to have those conversations. Church manual. How many of you have read the church manual from stem to stern? How many of you know what the church manual is? I see a good brother back here. He's done better than I have probably. I think it's online at this point. It used to be the Holy Grail in printed form, but it talks about the two-adult world. An open door. If you don't in your door have, you know what vision panels are? If in the doors you don't have a window put in there so that people can see in and out, you need to leave a solid door open on the classroom. Volunteer screening. I don't know, and I'll have to defer to you guys. In the North American division, there is a database that you can go in and enter in information, and it comes back and says, this person has criminal activity in their background or doesn't. I don't know if you have that kind of mechanism down here yet. Yes? No? No. Okay, not a problem. We didn't have that in the NAD until, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. But volunteer screening is, if you go to the church manual, if you go to AdventistRisk.org, there are forms in there. They're called Volunteers Code of Conduct. There's a general form that asks general questions, and it asks you, have you been convicted of? Now, someone can lie. Someone may not have been caught yet. But have everybody do that. There's a code of conduct that we as volunteers all agree to, and it says, I'll never be alone with a child. I'll treat people with respect. I'll do these things. That's the bar. That's how we conduct ourselves in our local church. If I see my brother or sister not conducting themselves at those levels, that becomes that leadership conversation. Do training. It might just be me pulling away too. I'm not a pastor, I don't know how to do it. But do training. Talk about how, set the standard for how your church is going to do youth ministries. Talk about the standard of how you're going to conduct yourselves. Don't worry. All of you are qualified to do that training. It's common sense. It's taking the time to be a leader and conducting the training. What should we as a church do? I don't know how many people in here are pastors. You're my favorite and my least favorite people. You can tell my pastor I said that. His name's Tim, so he'll be all right. Pastors have a lot on their plate. We expect a lot out of them. We expect them to give a really great sermon. We expect them to provide emotional support. We expect them to raise money, do baptisms. And yeah, my term, the president is the CEO of the local church. I'm the CEO of Adventist Risk Management. I'm the least important to that team. If I died, ARM would continue to run. God forbid the other 30 people that I've worked with all perished. ARM would be in trouble. Your church will survive without a pastor. I'm not taking away from the importance that he brings. I hope I bring value and leadership to the ARM team. But there's a whole leadership team. There's a reason you're here. You're part of the leadership team. Work with your pastor. I want the pastor to do, here's a fun one. Ask your pastor to do a fire drill during high service. That'll be a fun reaction to see. You can get the treasurer on your side really easy. You know how? Do the offering first, then do the fire drill. The pastor, though, is going to struggle because he's going to be like, dude, if you do it before I serve my sermon, no one's coming back in. And your argument is, yeah, but if we do it at the end of the sermon, everybody was leaving anyway, so we don't get to see how it really worked. But work through that journey as leaderships. Insist on implementation of screening and training. This is a powerful meeting we're having here. You have a leadership team at this conference, at this union, they're saying safety is important to us. I hope it's important to each one of you. Are you going to take what we learned today and go back and implement it? When it comes to child protection around the world, I forget the exact statistic, but at a minimum, 8 out of every 10 kids that are physically abused, sexually abused, it happens from someone they know. It happens from someone they know. We can sit here and we can talk about all of the things to prevent bad guys from coming into our church. The bad guys, the bad ladies are in our church. Yes, we need to have a fence. We need to have proper controls in place. But what's the standard we're going to hold ourselves to internally? It's an interesting conversation, and as you get into the training, I suspect you may have the same things. If you ask people to sign a code of conduct that says, I've not done any of these things in my past, and I'm going to do the following things. If someone doesn't want to sign that, why? A lot of times, there are small churches. Sister so-and-so has volunteered and been part of our youth ministries for 25 years. She is unwilling to take the background check or to sign the code of conduct. What do you do? Because you're telling everybody else this is the standard. Sister so-and-so has 25 keeping the primary room going when no one else wanted to do it. That's a tough decision as a church body to pull Sister so-and-so aside and say, I'm sorry, if you're not willing to adopt and conduct yourself as we do now, you'll no longer be volunteering. That's tough. That's what leadership is. As a leader at ARM, I don't know what time it is, I don't want to go super long. Oh, we got another 3 hours, right? I grew up at ARM professionally. A lot of the people that I am now their boss knew me when I was trying to get the files down. And you probably conduct yourself differently peer to peer. So now I'm the boss. I remember thinking, this is going to be interesting, but I've never been the president and CEO, but that's a pretty fun sounding title. I suspect everybody's going to get in line behind me and do what I say, right? About a minute into the job, I realized that wasn't going to happen. And for the last 4 years, I've been on that journey of how do you get them all in a line behind you and pushing you through. But the what becomes very important. The why becomes very important. If you're going to implement a new policy, if you're going to have people to sign and agree that we're going to conduct ourselves, why? Why are we doing this? Well, A, we believe in protecting children. We believe this is the Christ-like way to conduct ourselves. Fascinatingly, the world is different than it was 20 years ago. We have a different risk. The wolf outside the gate looks differently. The why becomes very important. As a leader, you're going to spend more time explaining why over and over. But as I get more seasoned in this, I get more and more success with here's what we're going to do and here's why we're going to do it. Because when they understand the why, they're willing to do it with me. Reference check thoroughly. Do you ask new volunteers to provide 2 or 3 people from their previous church or from their previous Pathfinder group to give them a reference? That takes time. Now I got to call and get a hold of somebody, or I got to send them a letter, or I got to send them an email. But there may be a reason that brother so-and-so left the church 5 miles down the road and came to our church. It may be because we have the new fresh hot pastor. Maybe because his girlfriend is here and like all good guys, he's coming there to impress her. It may be because he got in trouble at the old church and didn't conduct himself well. Check some background checks. But you got to treat everybody the same. Doesn't matter if he's the son of twice removed president of the General Conference, or it's Tim Northrup, who's unknown to the church. Treat everybody fairly and do a thorough background check or reference check. Establish clear reporting structures and expectations. And I apologize, I did not check jurisdictionally down here, but have you heard the term mandatory reporting?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a thing? So in the U.S., if you are a pastor or you're a teacher, you're a mandatory reporter. So if you notice that a kid is showing signs of abuse, blah, 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 you have to report that to the authorities. Many people aren't mandatory reporters. The Pathfinder leader may not be a mandatory reporter by law.
Wow.
But make sure you have a mechanism in place, a protocol, a process in place that says, if I notice something wrong, I'm not just going to sit on it and watch it. I'm going to talk to the local pastor. The local pastor is going to talk to the conference, administration, whoever they've assigned to do that. We treat every instant the same. Talk very freely. It's important that the church develops a plan on how to address this. What are you going to do at your local church if the person gets picked up Sunday evening by the police and it's in every local newspaper that local church, Seventh-day Adventist church member is arrested? Because the next thing that's going to happen is there's going to be a bunch of reporters in probably every Adventist church on the island looking for a comment. I speak for me. I'm not qualified to give a comment on very many things to the media. I have people that hopefully have gone through training, but you have a process. We're going to be transparent. We're going to talk about it as an organization. But you don't want the person out there, well, yeah, I saw him. He's been here for 10 years. He's always the guy that's always just touching all the girls on the shoulder. And, he didn't do anything about it because, yeah, I don't really know. We all knew it was coming. We thought if anybody happened, it would be him. It's like, whoa, let's I don't ask each one of you to go through the Rolodex of people in your head. There's a guy, he's long retired from Adventist Risk Management. He was a really nice guy, but he's a little bit strange. And we'd always kind of joke, if anybody ever comes in and shoots up the office, it's going to be that guy. And you look at it and you go, yeah, we were joking, but man, what happened if that guy had showed up and done that? We would have been like, oh. But work through a reporting structure there. Supervision, supervision, supervision. I might step on some toes. When you start a business, if each one of you started a business, how long would you run that business if you were losing money? There may be some very wealthy people here that go, you know what, I could run it for 6 months and lose money every month, but on month 7 it's got to start making money. People like me who probably say on month 1 it better start making a profit. How long do we run a ministry when nobody's interested in running the ministry? How long do we do, I don't know, off-road bugging for the, motorcycle riding for the youth when one adult shows up and there's not enough supervision there?
All right.
It's a very, very hard conversation in our church because we're ministry driven. We're one baptism changes the world. We're, if you build it, they will come. I'm part of that. I believe in that. But there also has to be the other side of that is if nobody is showing up to support that ministry, leadership has to have a conversation. It may not be the right time for that ministry. Maybe the congregation doesn't understand the why. And I know I am not well loved around the church because it appears I'm not ministry driven. But when someone doesn't have time to buy a 5-cent nut and save the church $200,000 or $300,000, save that young girl from probably not having the same self-confidence the rest of her life, I'm asking you as leaders to weigh both sides of that equation carefully. Yeah, God asked us to take some risks. But if you read the Bible, He doesn't ask us to, pardon me, be stupid. He asks us to be good stewards. So there's parables about stewardship in finance. There's stories about being, pardon me, good stewards of people. It's a two sides to that coin. I'm a church leader, I do not want to bring our church to a screeching halt. But sometimes God's answer is, it's not the right time for that ministry. I was willing to listen to God when He gave me what I wanted, when I didn't want to be working for the church. Yeah, He opened the door, He kept opening the door of, your wife has a job at a school. The HR person at Adventist Risk Management takes an interest in you, tries to get you a job. He was giving me the answer. My answer that I wanted was, no, you are now at the financial mecca of the world, Washington, D.C. Here's a job that pays $500,000 a year because that's what I wanted. I could still be on that journey, or I could listen to what God's kept pushing me toward. No, you can make a difference in my church this way. Sometimes the answer is what we want to hear, and I find that fascinating as Adventists. We're pretty bullheaded people. We're willing to keep. Sometimes God's answer is, it's not quite the right time. Let's find another ministry. Adults focus on supervision without distraction. Y'all are a bunch of kids. Am I supervising you?
Nope.
No. These things are the worst enemy of supervision. They really are. You want the pilot that's flying your plane to be doing this up in the cockpit? You want the guy driving down the road at 80 miles an hour on the other side of the lane doing this? Because when a lawsuit happens, they're going to put you on the stand. Pastor. 35 people, bunch of kids on the playground. How did you miss little Johnny Klein 40 feet in the tree over there? How did you not see him drowning in the ocean? Well, I wasn't looking. What do you mean you weren't looking? Well, I there was 35 other kids. Do you have a cell phone? Well, of course, everybody does. Were you looking at your cell phone? Well, I have in the past. I don't really call. Well, we subpoenaed your records, and you were texting right when that kid was drowning. I'm just picking on the guy we met at Barclay. But that's the kind of thing I see in the church is we get stuck when we do the wrong thing. When we're asked to supervise, we commit to supervising, man, this thing's got to go in the pocket and be left alone for a while. I can't just sit down and talk to the elder. I got to focus. I think the rest are pretty self-explanatory. Church security. It's a hot topic in the United States, at least. I don't know if you guys haven't had any church shootings down here. I don't think so. Keep it that way. Praise the Lord. And it's interesting. In the U.S., there's been a few churches that someone has walked in and shot. We actually have a case right now. We're representing the Adventist Church where a individual, there was an outside baptism, the individual walked into the crowd with a gun and wanted to shoot the pastor because he didn't think his wife or girlfriend was supposed to get baptized. Fortunately, someone got the gun and I think it just went through someone's hand. We have had cases where a child stabbed a teacher to death at school. So the church has not been immune to those far before we've had the more mass shootings. But to me, that's just a catalyst and an attention grabber for many other things that we need to secure around our churches. What is the one thing we believe as Adventists? Well, we believe in a lot of things, but when I come to a church, when I came here today, there was people shaking my hand, saying hello to me, or being friendly. I think that could be part of security. Hopefully this video doesn't make it back to my church. I've been there for 20 years. It's the most unfriendly church. It really is. There's maybe the word clicks. Why did it fit into this 3-click over here? We'll never leave this pew, and we've solved the world's problems for my church here, and then there's this and that. I say that a little tongue-in-cheek. Probably not the friendliest guy either on a Saturday morning, to be truthful. But church security starts in the parking lot. Can you imagine if you came to one of our churches as a guest and someone directed you to a parking spot? They walk into your car and they open the door and say hello. Wouldn't you be more inclined to come back to that church? You get to the door, there's a friendly face. Hey, how you doing? Welcome to my church. Here's a bulletin. Let me walk you in. Have you met Sister So-and-so? You can sit with her today. Some of that is very basic stuff that I think our Adventist church needs to wake back up and do. That's easy stuff, but it starts to put an eye and a face on the people that are coming and going. probably been about 3 years ago. I go to a church, it's probably twice as wide as this and a little bit longer, but it's got the nice center aisle. My pew is right back there where the lady is sitting right there. That's my pew, by the way, in my church. No one better take my seat there. But that's where my wife and I always sit. I'm sitting there, and our pastor, we have a couple pastors, but our youth pastor, she's up front giving announcements. This guy, I mean, I'm pretty tall, but this guy looked tall. He comes walking down the center of the aisle with a guitar case. And he just walks straight down the aisle, sits right in the front row, and you just hear him start saying something to the female pastor. And she's, behind there giving it, and you just hear him just chirping, and he's got kind of a deep voice. And then he stands up, and he gets about this close to her, and he's just talking to her. It's like really weird. I was glued to my pew. I didn't know what to do. Oh, I figured get up and go and confront the guy, but taller than me. Hey, I've been flying a lot. My back's a little sore. I had to confront him. There's somebody else. There's a team of people that take care of that in our church, right? Well, finally, 2 or 3 deacons came up and kind of got around the guy. And then he started getting belligerent. And they finally escorted him out. Well, I could hear him still kind of getting louder back there in the atrium behind the closed doors. So at this point, I found my courage, and I got up and I walked to the back of the church and walked out. And here's the guy standing there, and they're addressing it, but he's not. It's not de-escalating. He's getting more irritated. And within 10 or 15 seconds, you could tell. Either the guy was intoxicated or he had something mentally not going well. He was having a bad day. And I said, guys, have we called the police? From a distance, I said, full honesty. And no, we don't call the police at church. No, we need to call the police. This guy's not getting happier. No, we don't call the police. I call the police. Full of gusto there. But I share that as we didn't have a plan at our church. We didn't have people assigned. The guy made it through multiple doors and multiple things to walk down the center aisle of our church. No one stopped to even say hello to him, because I can guarantee you if someone had, the dude was having a conversation with himself. He would have been, something would have triggered for most of us that this guy needs to have, we need to address before he gets to the front of the church. How many of you have a key for your church? A few of you out there. How many of others in your church have a key to the church? How often, are there 40 or 50 people that have keys to the church? Do you have a plan in place that when someone leaves and goes to worship at another church and becomes a member of XYZ Seventh-day Adventist Church, that they turn their key in? When they're no longer Pathfinder leader, do they have access to the Pathfinder van or the room where all the Pathfinder equipment's kept? Some of these very basic things are what we don't do as a church. We have a plan in place that allows us, hey, every 4 years we're going to change the locks in the church, rekey. It's a tough thing. It costs money. Some really neat technology now where you can use fingerprints or a card that are more easy. Wow, I don't make sure that gets on there. Are easier to control. Trim bushes and trees near building to reduce. Have you heard the term low-hanging fruit? There's bad people in this world that walk around through commercial neighborhoods and they're looking for the place that's the easiest to get into. I'm looking out this window. I don't know what the protocol is, but there's not a lot of parking. There's not a lot of lights next to this church here. I see some out the back. But if someone can get around this church we're meeting in, they can break into one of these windows fairly easy. There's not a lot of lights to light them up tonight. Do we have good lighting outside? Have we trimmed the bushes back from our windows? Do we have some of those very basic things cared for? Consider vehicle barriers for vulnerable entrances. I don't remember what this one looks like. Some churches I go to have 4 or 5 different entrances in and out of the parking lots. Do you strategically put something in that entrance during church service that doesn't allow people to go in or out of that one, and you funnel them? That gets me reminding of, I don't know if this is an outside door, but the church I go to, I already said that's my pew. The entrance to my church is the back right. That's where I always go into the church. That's not the main entrance to the church. The main entrance is over here, but there's my entrance, there's Brother so-and-so's entrance, there's this entrance, right? We all have it. It's going to be a hard thing for the average church, but maybe my entrance needs to be locked from the outside. From the outside. Can't lock it from the inside, but maybe a security measure is everybody has to come through the front, the main entrance. Have someone there to watch it. I think alarms and I think video equipment is a neat tool, but it has to be set up well, it has to record. We've had break-ins at Adventist churches where they go, yeah, we have a video camera, can we get the tape? Well, but it hadn't been working for 4 months. Well, okay. Or, we know that it's not made for night vision, so it doesn't work at the night. Well, okay. Talked about the zone area. Talked about the hospitality team. That's why they don't give me PowerPoints, because I just talk. I don't necessarily keep up with them. I think there is a place for what you can call a hospitality or security team. But it takes the support of the pastor, it takes the support of the board. Have some dedicated security teams. I was watching basketball this afternoon. It was the Boston Celtics playing the Lakers. And I was reminded, you watch, I don't know, there's 20,000 people in the crowd. There's some guys and gals that stand by the basketball court. They're facing the crowd the whole time. The crowd goes nuts. LeBron James just did a 360, and this guy is just sitting there. He can't ever turn around and look and see what everybody's celebrating. Can you imagine walking into this church? This church does have pews here, but can you imagine a chair? There's just a guy or a gal that faces the crowd the whole time. It'd be a little bit unnerving for me, but that's a new way that our church might have to conduct security. We might have to have people facing the crowd that can sense when something's going wrong. Do you know who the medical first responders are? You might already have a great asset in church if someone's a firefighter, someone's an ambulance driver, someone's a police officer. Ask them to come in, assess your church. Our church, our previous pastor, I didn't know, I think he had different reasons for doing it than I would as the risk manager for the church. But he had a Sabbath set aside where he had the local law enforcement come in, and he gave a prayer dedication for him. We had a ministry where they went down and created, it wasn't a prayer garden, but it was a garden with a table where they could eat. There was a relationship between our church and the local police department. The police department had been in and seen what our church looked like, at least. Take the time to become familiar, to have those people. What a way to witness. What a way to say, hey, our church gets out at, I'm a noon guy. Our church gets out at noon every day, or every Saturday. I don't know what the culture is here. You guys more 1:30, 2 o'clock? I mean, that's all right. As long as you have a good potluck afterwards, I'll stay around for a little while. But can you imagine the police department caring about your church enough that they're willing to sit in your parking lot on Saturday morning, or willing to be there at noon or 1:30 when you let out? What a great way to witness to people as well. It's the whole church family. The job of security, we don't have, most of our churches don't have enough resources to go hire a security firm. If you fly in the airport, if you see something, say something. I was at the airport, it's been, 4 years ago, and I was sitting there. There was a guy, he had a t-shirt on, he had shorts on, and he had his socks pulled up. They were white socks, they weren't black, I was amused by that, but he's just kind of like pacing. I was like, really, he just looked nervous. And then he turned at one point, and I saw like a bulge in his sock. I'm like, really strange to have a calf muscle coming out the side of his sock like that, you know? I'm like, and that tied in with just the general nervousness of this guy. I was like, what's going on? I kept watching, and I could see this bulge, and I was like, it's really odd. So I was like, oh, I can just sit here and not say anything. I finally mustered the courage. I walked up to the gate and said, hey, see the guy over there? He goes, yeah. I said, he's got something in his sock. It just doesn't look quite right to me. The guy didn't get sworn by the SWAT or anything, but the gate agent walked over, had a conversation with the guy, talked to him, and he came back by me very casually. He goes, there's just a box of cigarettes. Okay, no problem. But it could have been something. If you see something, say something. Are you prepared to say something? My wife, she's the better at it. Let's just be honest. She's youth leader or South School leadership. She's a greeter. She's this. I did show up and sit down at this point in my career, but she's a greeter. Just because someone's greeting, have you taken the time to have a training session to empower them, to help them be the eyes and ears? They're more than a smile. They're more than a friendly face. If trained, and it doesn't take SWAT training. It doesn't. But see something, say something type of training. I'll work these into my conversation throughout. I think the bottom one is important. It's not our job to detain people. It's our job to call the police. If they're willing to walk off your premises, let them take a picture of them. Know that they were wearing a blue shirt with white shorts and whatever it is, and let the police know. We've had a few here in the last month or two. And I don't have the perfect answer for this, but it was the pastor was concerned and called Adventist Risk Management because he knew that there was a family that was splitting apart or was split apart, and the extended family had called in a threat to the church. They said, we're unhappy, I think in this case it was the man's family and the wife and him were going through a divorce, and his family called in and said, we know she goes to your church and we're going to get her. What do you do? My vote, cancel church. It's the safest thing to do, right? Well, not going to probably happen. Well, that'll be fun. But what do you do in that case? I don't think there's the perfect answer. Maybe if the pastor has a relationship with the husband, he can call and say, what's going on? Maybe if you know so-and-so is friendly with the family, you can, and a leadership team can go and say, we've got to find out what's going on with a member of our flock. What's happening? But then there's some very physical things we need to do. This is where if we have a relationship with the local police department, say, hey, a veiled threat was called in. We would appreciate if you could be in our parking lot with your car there. It's a physical presence. Do you talk to the elders and the deaconesses and the deacons and the greeters and say, hey, here's what's going on. We're not going to make an announcement from the front of the church and embarrass the Brown family. But here's something we need to be aware of as a church family, and we're going to kind of be more observant this Saturday. Those are ideas. That's what we shared with them. I don't think the answer is to shut down church for that Saturday. But you have to use some judgment working with your conference. You know the people. We'll quickly got to go through some school stuff here. Top-down commitment. We talked about a lot of those concepts. Have a safety planning team at a school. From a very legal standpoint, as a church, we don't have the same standard of security as we do and should be held accountable to in our schools. A church is an open environment. When you walked in here tonight, I don't know what your expectation for security was. But you didn't go through a metal detector, you didn't do any of those things. So this is an open environment. But at schools, we have a higher level. We're taking care, custody, and control of children. Parents expect them to be safe. You're going to have to work hard at your schools. Same concepts with the church. Are your teachers trained? They're not going to replace the police officers, but if they see something, do they know what to do? A lot of the same things here. Won't go into. I'm not a personality that repeats the same things over and over. Do a fire drill. Do an earthquake drill. Do a hurricane drill. Do an active shooter drill. The idea of the drill and the reason for it is important, but it's the practice. It's the same in a local church. If you know Sister So-and-so's in a wheelchair, do you have a deacon who's assigned to get her out of the church if something goes wrong? Or is it going to be everybody fleeing for the door? Probably the latter, right? I should dig it up sometime. Have y'all heard of the Seinfeld show? I just love the humor there, but there's a scene where, I don't know if you know the characters, but George is kind of a short, portly, balded guy. He's got a lot of problems in his life, but he's at a friend's house. And it's a party of some sort, but a fire breaks out in the stove. And you see George running toward the door, pushing kids and women aside, fire, fire, and he saves himself. And when he gets out, everybody's just looking at George like, dude, thanks for being the man of the house, type thing. But that's my vision sometimes of the church, is that we're just all panicked and running. Do a missing child drill. That's kind of a new one. March, I'm going to get the date wrong, but the third weekend of March is Safety Sabbath. In the North American division is where but those resources are available at safetysabbath.com, .org, I apologize. But glad to have any division, any union, any conference, any church participate in Safety Sabbath. I get to do this every day. My mind is in constant mode of risk management for the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I get to see all the war stories. I get to hear how it all goes wrong. And that's part of life for me. But then I get really fun occasions like this, where I don't know, there's 40 or 50 of us here. Again, I'm the guy that got to travel to the Bahamas. Not a bad gig to pull rank on and get. I get to be paid to be here within reason. I got to stay in a fun place and walk down the beach this morning. Each one of you are taking time away from your family tonight. Each one of you live in the Bahamas. It's probably not as exciting for you as it is for me. But we can make a difference in the Adventist Church. You make a difference in the Adventist Church. I appreciate each one of you coming out here. I appreciate the support that you you guys give to us as Adventist Risk Management in our ministry. I'm reminded of, on the sixth day, God created man and woman. But he gave us free choice. He knew when he created us that there would be a point in our lives where we would have a choice to sin or not to sin. But he also put in a plan that said, if man does, takes that free choice and doesn't use it wisely, I have a plan in place. There's a risk. There's a risk that the people I created after my being will do the thing I don't want them to do. He could have said, I'm not giving them any free choice. We'd all be robots, I suspect. But he gave us that free choice. And he said, there's a risk. And I'm going to mitigate that risk. I'm going to give them a risk management plan that says, if they choose to do something wrong, pardon me, if an accident happens, I'm going to send my son down. And you know the rest of the story. I think God, through many, many stories in the Bible we read, is a risk manager. I think he's put in amazing things in our lives and stories to help mitigate risk. He's asked us to be stewards of his church, of his ministry, of his message. We are the Seventh-day Adventist Church. You are the Seventh-day Adventist Church. On any given Saturday, I'll be up in Maryland meeting at my church. You'll be down here meeting at yours. And hopefully the people that attend our churches, hopefully the people that see our good works through ministry, through Pathfinders, through whatever it is, look at us and go, that's an amazing organization. They have an amazing message. They have an amazing plan to mitigate risk. They care for my child. That's all I can ask out of each one of you is, please, do the right thing. Doing the right thing will not be the easy thing always. But if we do the right thing, our church will continue to be an amazing church. We'll have more resources, whether it's financial, whether it's supervision, whatever it is, people will want to be part of this. You're not here by accident. I appreciate that so much. That's what I have for you. I don't know if we want to do questions and answers or yes. Getting a big nod, yes. Do we need a microphone or no, there's a microphone right behind you.
Yes, good evening. My question, if you can give us some ideas what churches in North America do as it relates to cybersecurity. For example, this church has internet. Now the church may just make a decision to just lock everything down, but some churches allow some of its members to access the internet. What do North American churches do to help curtail persons going to the wrong site, someone hacking the system? Give us some ideas what you're using.
Yep. Full disclosure, I'm not an IT expert. But the things, if you go to our website and you sign up, you'll see a solutions news article that will be sent to your website or to your email. But we just did one. And it's the idea of, I think the article is, should you provide Wi-Fi or not? I think in today's world, part of being an organization is to have Wi-Fi. But kind of in layman's terms, you need a network that is walled off and just for church business. Whether it's wired, whether it's wireless. That's where your records are kept. That's where your Facebook account is accessed. You have this walled off environment and servers that only are for the business of your local church. You have a limited number of people who have passwords and things to get into there. You then have your guest Wi-Fi. That is a separate network. It's not connected in any way to any of the servers where the business of the church is kept. And you can make that as open or secured as you want. You could have a password that changes, but my understanding is by having that separate network for guests, that's the key to success. Is you're not allowing them to ever touch or be able to touch the church business side of the network. Does that make sense?
Follow up.
Yep.
I'm really referring to someone using, oh, sorry. I'm referring to someone using the guest network. For example, at my church, we use presentation software that's connected via the internet. If we had the bandwidth, I'd love to open it up and give everyone the password so that as my slides change on the screen like yours, they're getting text on their phone. That sort of follow. But someone at the same time may choose to go on a porn site, a hacking site, or something of that nature. So I'm looking at protecting a church from risk management from that standpoint. A child meets a stranger in a chat room, and they arrange to meet after church. And they say, well, you didn't have the church Wi-Fi secure. From that angle.
So, how you can have a network that can share your screen and things, you're exceeding my knowledge of how, that can be just made available on a website that they can get through your guest network, that would be fine. What is the liability if somebody uses our network to set up meeting a child or something? I'm willing to say there's not a real high standard of expectations on you having a guest network that is so locked down no one can use it. So from a liability standpoint, I'm more concerned about the liability of people getting into your private records, them being able to even, if it's not published, and it probably doesn't fall into completely private information, but the idea of we have the directory for the church. I think you need to keep that kind of private and secure because you don't want somebody having Mr. Brown, first and last name, address and all those things. You want that blocked off. But I think having an open Wi-Fi network for guests, and if they choose to not use that correctly, yes, they can try and sue our church, but I think our liability is low in that aspect. I think you can choose to have a password, and you can change that password frequently. That way it keeps the honest people out. That way at least they have to come into your church and get the password here. It can't be someone in the street. But from a liability standpoint, I'm more worried about them getting into e-Adventist or something like that. If you have that walled off, you're safe.
Good evening. I heard you talking about risk management, so I want to find out. Let's say an individual have, let's use a car, a vehicle vandalized or it happened in the church property. Does risk management channel some of that dollars back to help that person?
So did your car get broken? No. So the church, from that perspective, is like any other business. They don't, I think in today's society, you almost probably be a good idea to maybe post a sign that you're not responsible for any damage to people's vehicles. But the church is not responsible for damage or someone breaking into it. And from an insurance perspective, no, we currently don't provide any insurance that would protect that. Now, if the person could really, it's tough, but if the person anybody can sue the church and sue you for anything. It doesn't mean they're going to be successful. But they could sue the church and say, I had an expectation my car would be broken into, and blah, blah, blah. And if they could prove that, then yes, there is insurance that would protect the church from its negligence. But proving negligence is going to be hard for them. That's kind of the bouncing ball on that. They'd have to prove we were negligent. If we were, pardon me, not smart and we put up signs and said we would be responsible, that would be really bad and it would be easy to prove negligence. So I'm not recommending that. I'm recommending the opposite of park at your own risk. You're responsible for the belongings in your own car.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have two questions. Good evening. You talked about limiting the amount of entrance you may have for a service. How do you balance that between, in case of hazard, you also need adequate exits for people to get out, in and out. So I know like nightly services such as this, we always tend to sometimes have one access door because of not wanting, depending on the neighborhood that the church may be in. So we don't always have people there protecting it. So what is the best suggestion for, for balancing the situation like that? That's my first question.
Okay, so the key is we can never ever lock a door from not allowing people to leave. So it always has to be open for egress. It doesn't have to be unlocked for people to come into it. So I don't know if it's an outside door, but it could be locked to not allow someone to come in here, but it always has to be open for me to leave the church. So if the police show up, don't blame me. So it gets to, you can funnel people into one entrance because they don't have to get in very quickly. You just can't lock and not allow someone to leave through that church, through that door.
Thank you. Also, you talked about filling out forms for people with history of risks, whether they've had any previous criminal records. That, I think that's all well and good. How do you suggest, or how do you had issue where people may, in some situation, be found with a previous record in some area, and how do you balance that between repentance, rebaptism, forgiveness, and people wanting to serve in a particular area? Maybe they stole something on the job, that means they can't now work in the Treasury Department.
Well, a very good question, and it's not a, it's an easy question for me to answer, but it does require thought on our part. Is there is a repercussion for sin. God forgives us, but we still are a sinner, and there are still we will still be accountable. There's a repercussion for that. So, from a risk management standpoint, I will forgive anybody, but there are repercussions for what they did. If they stole money before, they can't work with money in the church. The local church, you can ask them to work with money if you want to, but they're not insurable if they steal something.
Right.
If someone, they're not insurable if they steal something from the church, if you know they've stolen before.
Correct.
What about an accident then?
Well, if it's an accident, it's probably not a criminal, there's not a criminal component to it. If someone has been convicted of child molestation, they cannot work with youth in our church.
Correct. Period.
And I know that doesn't mean that we don't forgive them. Church is a place for sinners.
That's right.
But they can't work in an area where they have
Oh,
a
rapid.
predisposition to have an issue there. I understand that's a harder conversation than I'm presenting here, but that becomes the standard we're held to. Is if you were just a professional and as a teacher, and you had been convicted of molesting children, you wouldn't get hired as a teacher anymore. So that's the standard we're held to. So I will forgive the sinner, but there will be an accountability for the sin.
Question from one of our family islands, Eleuthera. What is the consensus on camping? Should counselors sleep in the tents with campers?
Oh, it's always a tough one. This is one of the, I'm just picturing the real life versus what Tim says. I think it depends on what's going on. If it's a large enough tent where you can have hopefully 2 adults, then yes. If not, then you need to have proximity of an adult in a tent close enough that they can hear what's going on in the other tents. There is not a perfect science to this. We can't prevent everything. But I think within reason, if it allows for there to be 2 adults in a large tent with children, yes. If not, then you need to have a pod of tents with an adult close enough proximity they can at least be aware of what's going on. Yeah.
It is now 8 o'clock. Do we have your permission? Do we have any more questions to go over like 10 minutes?
I can stay here. My
Okay.
flight leaves at 3 o'clock tomorrow.
We have 2 more questions.
Just, you mentioned,
Those asking questions, can you just come to the side because the camera needs to pick you up? So please just come towards me so that the camera can also record you for those listening online. Thank you.
Sorry, it's not really a question concerning the presentation, but you mentioned you would like us to be able to do training sessions. So do we have material that we can use for such?
Yep. So if you go to AdventistRisk.org, that's our website, you will find tons and tons of material. It may not be set up perfectly for every presentation you do, but there will be material that you can have impromptu training sessions for small groups. So yeah, I'm confident in that. If you really get stuck, shoot us an email and we can help you through it. But yeah, there's a lot of materials on our website.
Good night, everybody. I represent the Hillview Church, Seventh Adventist Church. And out of 10 points we've made tonight, we have 9 already covered. So we say praise the Lord for that. That's true. I just have a question on camping again. I'm glad you brought it up. And we were told that some time ago that our campsite should not be close to the beach. And this is interesting because I go to North America and they get big rivers running through their campsite. They get big ponds and lakes in their campsite.
That's right.
And how you come to the Caribbean, where the island is surrounded by water, and when you go to the south, you have the biggest school for the conference in the south, less than a mile from the water, and you can tell me I can't have a campsite next door. What's something wrong with that?
I will not disagree with you.
Okay.
Not sure who or how or when we said that to you, but I think it comes back to the basic risk management principles of I'm not going to come in and tell you not to camp on the beach or vice versa, walk into Alaska and tell them not to camp in the snow. But I will share a story of there is an organization or a church that goes to the beach frequently. And they have a trip they do every year to the beach. The supervisor went into the ocean, came out of the ocean, sat back on his chair and didn't say anything. Kid got in the ocean, there was a really bad riptide and passed away, drowned. As we talked to the church, we uncovered that this gentleman was not experienced in the ocean. He wasn't qualified to be the supervisor. And so all I can ask of you is, you are way more qualified than I will ever be to understand the risk of the ocean, the risk of the beach. Make sure you have qualified supervision. Make sure you know what it should be on a beach, because when it comes to something going wrong, it's going to be a jury of your peers who know the beach as well as you do. And if everybody knows you camp from the beach at least 40 yards, and our church decided to only do 10 yards away, our peers are going to hold us accountable to that decision. So no, I'm not going to tell you not to camp on the beach. That would be kind of a little bit insane. Any other questions? Oh, an easy crowd. Thank you so much for your time again.